Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist. Tonight I'm joined with Goosebumps enthusiasts and BD Horror in this collaboration video we've been wanting to do as of today because we came up with the idea on the fly. And the concept we wanted to talk about is our top five, technically top six Goosebumps books that are commonly conflated with their episode counterparts. Now, what we mean by this subtopic is that these books that we're going to mention had episode counterparts back in the 90s show. And for some reason, in casual conversation or in reviews, people take events that only happened in the episodes and attribute them to events that actually happened in the book. And we are basically just not really calling it out, but just kind of bringing discussion to it because this phenomenon has been going on for quite some time. Um, so stay tuned to hear what books we have. Uh, let's start off with the introductions. I'm Goosebumps Completionist. Welcome to my channel. In case you're not subscribed, please go hit the subscribe button. And please go check the description in the comment section for these two fellows' channels. We have BD Horror. How are you doing tonight, BD Horror?
Yo, people of the night, your boy has returned again. And no, I'm not off Dr. Brewer's plans. All right, take a look at my eyes. I'm sober for this one because we're analyzing episodes. Although if I was, it would make this conversation more fun. So excited to talk about this topic because this is actually a topic that we have discussed on Discord and other places, but we never actually made an official video on it. So this is a first time convo and it's going to be fun. So look forward to it.
Nice. And Bruce, how are you doing tonight, Bruce?
I'm doing pretty good. I stuffed my guts out at Pizza Ranch, and my doctor says I'm morbidly obese, apparently. So, by that means, I can officially say that you need to subscribe to these fellas right here, and also me, your one and only, Goosebumps enthusiast. Very excited to do this collab.
Yeah, we're very excited. We actually had a top five in mind, but there was one other episode, I think Bruce brought it up, that we just felt like we had to talk about in kind of like an honorable mention slot. So we're going to go ahead and just start right off the bat with our honorable mention pick. This episode comes from season 4. It was one of the final two-parters of the whole show in that run of 4 episodes that were all two-parters. And it's How I Got My Shrunken Head. Now, Bruce, I'm gonna let you pick up this conversation first about How I Got My Shrunken Head. What do you see out there that people confuse with the book in the episode when people are talking about it?
So, before we quickly get into differences, I also would like to say that The Shrunken Head, the story synopsis, is about a little boy who's obsessed with jungles and finds interest in them like quite a bit. And his aunt sends him a shrunken head one day and basically says that he should go to this island, from what I remember. It's been a little while, but and on this island, all this crazy adventurous stuff starts to happen, and it greatly affects his life and everyone surrounding him. Now, how does this compare to the episode, though? Well, right off the bat, uh, there's a lot of differences in how the story kind of builds up in the introduction. Now, because this is a two-parter, there's a lot more they can do with the episode, I guess. So, it's pretty similar in some aspects, but in others, being as I guess one of them would definitely be that the mom, her reasoning for sending the kid to the jungle is quite different because she wants to be with her boyfriend. While in the book, I think it's just mainly because of the aunt seeing his aunt is kind of important to him and all this stuff, and he kind of begs her to do it. While in the episode, she's just like, yeah, whatever. There's also some other changes that are a bit minor. I need completionists to help me out on this one. The book, it's been a little too long, but I can also say that the climax also has some differences with uh, another part of the book being the tiger scene, which completely is removed from the episode and is one of the big moments that everyone remembers in the book. These are commonly confused differences, and there's also just a lot of stuff right towards the end that very much changes. And like we said, we see a lot of people kind of confusing the two when talking about it in conversation. Completionist, if there's anything I missed here, please let me know.
Okay, so I think you brought up some pretty good differences to start off with, but I feel like the main things people get confused weren't mentioned, so I'll go ahead and mention them here. So off the bat, there are a lot of How I Got My Shrunken Head book fans. This is probably the outlier to the other five we're going to talk about. Where, in my opinion, I think majority of fan consensus will tell you that the book is better than the episode, even though I personally disagree, but it's not my place to say it. The main differences I see in this case is that the differences in the episode are usually used to put a strike on the book, which I don't think is fair to do. And we'll start off with one of the ones. And this whole thing, it's played up like a Saban Entertainment episode. It involves an Elvis pilot. Now, there is a pilot in the book, and I think he might be an impersonator or some like ex-military person, but he's not played up the way the episode does in like a comedic, silly way. And people think that that is a big thing that they're against. So that really didn't happen the way it did in the book, and I've heard it a couple of times now. So to clear the air on that, yeah, there's one. Two, and I think BD Horror brought this up in the preparation before we got on to record, is the fact that the shrunken head is essentially used as a magic wand in the story, where when plot needs it and needs the convenience of it, it's used to get Mark out of some hairy situations. As in the episode, the Shrunken Head is basically a character of its own. It has a personality, it's more active in the story, it's a lot more involved. And I've seen a lot of people say that they love the Shrunken Head book because of the Shrunken Head character. If we're all being honest, in these descriptions, while I've never heard anybody say in specifics what these actions were from the Shrunken Head, I'm assuming that they're talking about the episode here. In regards to the screen time in the episode compared to the book, it's literally just an item. So, there's that thing. And then the last thing, surprisingly, people get confused with is the ending of the story. The ending is probably the biggest telltale sign if they've actually read the book. In the book, there is a recontextualization, mild spoilers here, about the whole events. And it's kind of told in it's like a time skip kind of way. And Mark's telling the story how he got his shrunken head and all that. And you never really get to find out what happened to I think they're called the Hollings or whatever in the story. As in the episode, you do get to find out what happened to them. They're put into a tank, like a little terrarium of sorts, where Mark basically keeps them as pets. That only happens in the episode, and I've seen many people say that the ending of the episode happened in the book. It did not happen like that in the book. Let's all be real. So yeah, those are the big three. If anybody has anything else to add, BD, you have something you want to add to that?
And I was gonna say one of the big things that I noticed was from the differences from the book to the episode. You'll say that a lot of the times in reviews, people will praise Mark's character, and how he has this kind of fun personality. He has these powers given to him. That is not in the book. In the book, Mark is very much toned down. He's kind of a one-trick pony about his jungle obsession, and the powers granted to him by the Shrunken Head are nowhere near as spectacular or as played up as it is in the episode where he's doing flips while levitating, and he's doing that Kalia super hyped up superhero stuff. That's not in the book. In the book, a lot of the times you will see nature being manipulated with vines. You will see animals listening to the commands of the Shrunken Head. It's very much played again, as completion has brought up, a magic wand compared to the episode where it's much more like Tinkerbell, a fairy. It's got its own personality. It's not just an object. And to further add to that, this is a small point, but it does emphasize the point that the episode producers wanted to add originality and individuality to the Shrunken Head. Is in the book, it's very much established that on this island there are thousands of shrunken heads, and many of them are collected by the Hollings. So this is very much in the book telling the story about this tribe that dealt with magic, that lived on this island, compared to the basically episode where it's treated as this unique entity that everybody is seeking after, when in reality it's basically there's a ton of these objects in the book, and it's just Mark's connection to it that makes it important. I mean, obviously there's more adventure in the book. As Bruce brought up, there's a tiger scene, there's a scene with the ants. In the episode, it's much more like a Scooby-Doo kind of scheme going on. You have this whole kind of undercover plan. You have the hypnotized massage therapist. So if you hear any reviews where people are hyping up this whole sort of grandiose story, in the book it's not really a grandiose story. It's more like a GYG. If you read a GYG, it reads kind of like that. It's not one cohesive story as many people might claim it to be. But those are my points.
Bruce, did you have something you wanted to add?
To kind of further delve into some of this stuff, I'm so stupid. So I think that the shrunken head itself, like you kind of said with the whole powers thing, I think that the Kalia stuff is kind of in both. But like you kind of mentioned, it is very heavily used in the episode, while in the book it's kind of like a, kind of their situation where it's a change in the episode where the producers of the show definitely wanted to make it a more prominent thing, especially with the crazy stuff in the middle of the air where he's just kind of like flipping around. It's kind of wild. I'll also say that although both books are kind of goofy in some ways, I think that the episode really like builds that up like a lot more, while the book is just really adventurous and has like its moments that make it kind of like goofy, I guess. I feel like the episode just really almost tries to make it, especially with like you said, the plain Elvis. I hear so many people in comment sections telling people that one of the worst parts about the book is the pilot, and I'm assuming they don't mean the pretty basic pilot from the book. I'm assuming they mean the Elvis one. I don't know why someone would hate the pilot from the book because he does nothing. So it's like that isn't a very valid point. Not to throw anyone under the bus, but I do see that being an issue. I also, from what I remember in the Discord conversation where I brought this one up, I feel like it's always for the negatives. I never see this one, being kind of confused with the book because of the positives or anything, like a lot of the other ones on this book, on this story list. But with this one, I feel like it's the exact opposite, where you just have people kind of going, I don't like Shrunken Head. And that's totally fine if you don't. But I also want to hear valid reasons from the actual book rather than the episode. And I feel like, all of these books on this list have that issue, though I feel like this is one that I feel like doesn't really get mentioned because it's kind of a forgotten episode. Plus the fact that most people just in the general public will confuse the two so much. Even when I read the book for the first time, I had seen the episode multiple times before, and I could see glaring differences that I have seen people say in reviews talking about how I remember this being bad, because of something that happened, and it was usually because of something in the episode. So that's what I kind of wanted to add.
Okay. So, I think we pretty much said all we needed to say about our the first pick. So let's get into our actual top five here in our number five. BD, why don't you take over for our number five?
So number 5 on our list is actually quite the heavy choice, because this is actually a very well beloved one in the community, and it is justified. But again, just trying to make sure it's for the right reasons, and that is The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This has always been a very popular book, one of the early books that came out, and me personally, a lot of my friends, we all remember this one. And the episode is actually faithful in some regards, but it does add a lot of stuff to the book, and you'll hear sometimes people bring up stuff that is not in the book. So for those of you who don't know, Werewolf of Fever Swamp is about a kid named Grady who moves out to this place, Fever Swamp, mainly because his dad is this zoologist and he studies animals. And there's this unique pair of unique species of deer that he's studying out there. And what ends up happening is that as the days continue on that they're living here, they hear strange noises at night, howling, they have some weird encounters, and they start slowly uncovering that there might be a secret behind Fever Swamp, potentially a dangerous hermit that lives in there, and there may be a monster out there or a creature that is more than they prepared for when they moved in. The most common things I see confused with the episode and book. So the big thing I would have to say is the swamp hermit. We're going to go into detail about this, but the swamp hermit has a much more prominent role in the episode compared to the book. When you read the book of Werewolf of Fever Swamp, the swamp hermit is present there, and he's kind of like this urban legend figure, this crazy, dangerous kind of homeless guy that sort of played up for you not going into the forest and swamp for that reason. But in the episode, he's given backstory, he's given some action scenes, he's given an important role to the plot, and is not just this, side character meant to play up the urban legend. He actually plays a prominent role. And I have seen a few people commend the swamp hermit in the book, and I have a slight inclination to believe that they might be a little bit influenced by the episode, because the episode gave him a much more prominent role, and he is quite memorable there. But that is excluded from the book, or at least toned down significantly. And another big one I always see about Fever Swamp is there is a huge discrepancy in werewolf action. As you may expect, the Werewolf Fever Swamp, there is a werewolf. However, when you read the book, it's basically no action until the very climax reveal. Throughout the book, Grady hears scratching on the back door, he hears howling at night, he sees shadows moving through the fever swamp and the outside area, but he's not actually getting into any action involving the werewolf. Compared to the episode, where you get an entire chase scene, multiple transformation scenes, you get characterization of a certain villain, and on top of that, you get this house chase, you get a barnyard attack scene. It's basically like a full-on horror movie that you're seeing involving the werewolf. And that is not in the book. None of that. So when you hear people, especially in the reviewer community, justify that, oh, the book is so great because of, yes, the mystery, but also you get a lot of werewolf action, that's not in the book. That's only in the episode. You only get that much action-packed story in the episode, while the book is a very slow burn mystery until the very ending, and even then it's not a big scene. It's just for like a couple of chapters, and then you basically wrap up the book. So those are the big ones I can think of, but of course, if you guys have any, let me pass it off to Soda or Completionist to add on.
Here, I'll take this. I'll take this before I pass it over to you, Bruce. I want to add on to something real quick before I forget it. Another thing I should add on to the swamp hermit that did not happen in the book is if he died or not. And a lot of people I've heard say that, oh, the swamp hermit's death in the book was so tragic. I'm like, huh? He didn't die in the book. No. He died in the episode. He did not die in the book. Let me catch you slipping, people. I'm gonna call you out if you haven't read a book, and that's one of the big ones. And another thing I kind of want to add on too is that there's this whole thing about a barn shed in the episode that is played up for an entire scene, and people say, "Oh, the barn shed scene is very tense." That never happened in the book. It never happened. It all plays into what BD was talking about with the werewolf action. Those are like the big two. And then sometimes I see the ending because the endings are vastly different. I have from time to time seen people confuse the episode's ending, which is definitely a different take on the story because it's trying to give you two alternatives to interpret. As in the book, it's more straightforward. And also another thing, one last mild thing, is the name of Grady's dog in the story. There's two different names, and one's a dead giveaway if you've seen the episode. The dog's name is Vandal. In the book, his name is Wolf. So I've even made this mistake in the past where I called Wolf Vandal by accident, but I just think Vandal's a better name. But that is another common one. So just want to throw my hat in the ring there. Bruce, do you have anything you want to add?
So, kind of like y'all already kind of mentioned, although I kind of want to build off of it, I feel like the main thing that I see very confused with the book and the episode all the time is just the pacing. Just like the Phantom of the Auditorium episode kind of compared to the book, they both, the episode of Phantom very much tries to increase the amount of action screen time that the Phantom gets. So does this with the werewolf. And I feel like that is something that a lot of people, like you said, people keep going, Oh, the action Werewolf Fever Swamp. Some of them being my friends here on YouTube. I am not kidding you guys. It has happened. I have heard it. Will say, "Oh, it's such an action-filled book. I love it." I'm like, I don't, I don't think I would say that. And although I love Werewolf Fever Swamp more than Phantom, I feel like that's a good book to actually compare it to in this case, where I feel like all of this is very much more confused than the other one. They just in the episode, because it's made for TV and they want it to be more entertaining, I guess, in the TV audience. They want to have everything be kind of more grand and more action packed. With the book, like you guys said, it's a slow burn. It's a mystery, just like Phantom. And I feel like, yeah, that's the biggest issue I see that just keeps getting mixed up with this one. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we all brought up a lot of good points. BD, you want to have something?
I was gonna add two minor things. Two things I forgot to mention. Grady's fever is played up in the episode, so if you hear that anytime brought up, it's not often, but I have heard it a couple times. The fever of Grady plays more of a bigger role in the episode, and also this one I didn't mention, kind of because I forgot, and that's kind of the point of it. But in the book, it's not just Will and Grady. There's also another girl in there that's also a local neighbor, and she also talks to Grady quite a bit. That is eliminated from the episode. So in case you ever hear people excluding that fact, technically in the book, she has almost as much screen time as Will does. So if people forget to mention her at all, that's kind of kind of like a key sign that they probably focus more on the episode as opposed to the book, because obviously in the episode, Will is the main focus of the screen time aside from Grady, but in the book, they both kind of get an equal share until the very end.
Yeah, great things to add on it. I have heard the omittance of Cassie, which if you're not familiar with IDW comics, Cassie's character was the basis of how they made Secrets of the Swamp, which was their final comic series they made. And I always thought that was so bizarre because nobody remembers her. Like, who cares about Cassie? That's like a running gag. No, if you ask a lot of people that know the differences between the two, they'll say, "Oh, Cassie's not missed in the episode. It was already one character too many in the book." Uh, so there you go. All right, so let's move on to number 4. Number 4, I guess I'll pick this one up. It goes to Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes. Now, some people might be asking, Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, you know, what prompts you to put this on here? Well, a lot of folks, and it's not just people I'm close with on YouTube. I've seen many reviews and people's favorite episodes or favorite books, even I should say books actually, using things that happened in the episode to justify their love for the book. And if you compare the two plots, they're almost completely different stories. So let's just run down the book real quick, just very brief. So this boy named Joe, he has an older sister. His dad is competing with this neighbor who is kind of like a retired military veteran, and like this gardening competition. And his dad wants to have lawn ornaments on his lawn to kind of make his lawn stand out more. And throughout the whole book, Joe, who's the main character, and his neighbor friend Moose, who's actually the son of Major McCall, the retired military veteran next door, get into some shenanigans. And Joe thinks that through these shenanigans, the lawn gnomes might be alive and possibly framing him. And it spends the majority of the book on that. And then by the climax, you realize that the lawn gnomes are actually alive or not. And you get this whole scene. And then it ends on a very weird ending that is vastly different from the episode. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Bruce. Bruce, what differences do you notice off the bat in Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, and what do you see people confusing uh, them with?
Well, one big one, and major spoilers right here, folks. Sorry, but the entire, I guess, climax, if you want to call it that, of the book, where you kind of have all these garden gnomes with the characters, tons of crap is happening. I guess it's. I don't want to spoil too much, but uh, a lot of stuff is happening, and in the book, it's kind of just the same old, I didn't do it kind of story, and I don't want to focus too much on that because I feel like that's the obvious one that even some people will say. Some people won't confuse. Sorry. One thing that people confuse so much, and I know it's from personal experience, friends on YouTube, reviewers on YouTube, everybody, and like you said, the ending. Literally in the Discord a couple hours ago, a good friend of ours, I'm not going to say who, but literally confused the ending of the book with the episode because he said the episode's ending was sorry. He said the book's ending was funny, but the book's ending is not funny. The episode's ending is funny, and it's one that people remember a lot. Where the neighbor turns into a gnome. I actually really like that. I don't know. I think that's an improvement, but not to spiral off to a tangent. In the book, I can't exactly remember what happens, but I remember it was far different from that. It was more tried to be played on a serious note. I wouldn't say too serious, but like, man, that was that is something that I see just so commonly confused and mistaken with all the time. I feel like that has to be like a top 3 most mistaken Goosebumps episode counterpart issue right there. I don't know. I don't know if that's only me, but I see that happen so much, and the fact that it just happened just shows how ironic that is.
Yeah, to kind of add on that, when we're talking about the ending, we're talking about this is spoilers, so if you don't want to hear it, just mute us for a sec. Major McCall gets turned into a lawn gnome and put on Joe's family's property for this gardening competition in the end of the episode. And he's done so because the lawn gnomes in the episode have these abilities that they just don't share in the book. They can turn people into gnomes. They also have this thing where if light is cast on them, they have to freeze in place. That is not in the book. That's also a dead giveaway. People also confuse the look of the lawn gnomes. The look of the lawn gnomes, they just look like regular old lawn ornaments in the book. As in the episode, when they animate, they're given more human expressions. They're given more, you can like see their lips and inside of their mouths, stuff like that. So, those are just the easy pickings to kind of, set aside people if they're confusing it or not. But one of the big things I see people conflating, and this is a huge one, is the gardening competition itself. Let me tell you, in the book, do we ever get to see anything result of the gardening competition? Absolutely not. The only thing we ever get into is the neighbor hijink stuff, the sabotaging. There are some sabotage elements that you can kind of pinpoint if people have read the book that are not in the episode, like the spray can or the paint scene with the car. Stuff like that was not in the episode. However, the one thing I see people always confusing the episode with the book in terms of the competition is also tied to the ending when the people actually show up to Joe's family's house to see the results of the competition. That never happened in the book. In the book, it just ends on a new lawn ornament of a gorilla being put on the lawn and winking at Joe. That's literally that. You never see any result of it. So people are saying they like the neighbor hijinks plot of the competition. I can kind of see that in the book, but I think if you're talking in terms of its totality, you're probably referring to the episode. I'm gonna turn it over to BD real quick. BD, you have anything you want to add to that?
I read this book today. I'm gonna keep my personal opinion out of it, but I'm just gonna leave it off at this. Now, when people say that they enjoy this episode and love it, my eyebrows are gonna raise to the top of my hairline, and I'm gonna be waiting to see why they defend, the book and why the episode are so highly rated. Because the plots are very different, and just some of the things that I wanted to build up and add on it. Like my friend completionist mentioned, the Guardian competition is a much bigger focus in the episode. In the book, it's literally a background thought. It is mostly just between McCall and Joe's dad bumping each other's chest and trying to show off their own gardens to each other. It's not even a big focal point. It's not, you wouldn't even recognize it for half the point. Also, Joe in the episode and his family are a lot more sympathetic and bearable. Now, if you think that that's opinionated, you should look at their personalities in the book. Joe is on a consistent basis terrorizing his sister, There's also a character which does not exist in the episode called Moose, who is the son of Mr. McCall, who built Terrorizer. The father of Joe basically is not this soft-spoken, sympathetic person you look towards. No, he's very sort of egregious in the book. He's always bragging about his garden. He's always in competition with Mr. McCall. They are always calling each other out and taunting one another. He is not this soft-spoken person that people would resonate with in the episode. So when you see people talk about, oh, the characters, they like the main characters, I always kind of raise an eyebrow because they are much more, I guess, sympathetic and soft spoken in the episode compared to the book. And again, with the gnomes, the biggest difference between the book and the episode, which I've seen a ton of people bring up, is the gnomes' presence. You guys, the gnomes in the episode come alive very early on. Within like the first 6 minutes of the episode, they come alive. It's very obvious that they're alive, and they are this focal point of the episode where they're obviously causing mischief and a big plot point. In the book, until page 84, it is all fake outs with zero concrete evidence that the gnomes are doing anything. Till page 84, meaning that basically 80% of that book is no action involving the gnomes. So when you see people saying, oh, they love the gnomes as a villain, they love all the stuff that they do, all that stuff is in the episode. Their powers, their motivations of being creepy and trying to hurt the kids and cause damage, the fact that they're moving around, they got the voice acting, they're super creepy. None of that is in the book. And also, even just from the climax standpoint, the threat level of the gnomes that people talk about is in the episode because they are threatening specifically. We want to crush the kids, we want to fold them up and bend them and break their bones, we want to do all this stuff. In the book, when they get to a certain lady's basement, which is not in the episode, by the way, there is first of all 500 gnomes, much more than the episode, and they don't want to do all that horrible stuff to the kids. No, they want to tickle them and bounce on their stomachs as a trampoline, aka zero threat level, aka zero reason to be creeped out if they were to stay faithful. All of that stuff is in the episode. So I just wanted to build on that, all that creepiness, that threat level, that atmosphere, that action that you get that people will bring up. That's basically non existent in the book. And again, the creepy ending with the neighbor turning into a gnome, that is only in the episode. In the end of the book, like Completionist brought up, it's a giant freaking pink gorilla that winks at Joe, and then the book ends. Just gives him a little slightly nice wink, and then it ends off. So if you want to praise the episode, fine. If you want to praise the book for reasons like that, that's not exactly in the book. So just keep that in mind for the future.
Great points. I think we covered that one really well. BD, I'm going to turn it back over to you for our number 3. What's our number 3?
Number 3. So we covered Fever Swamp, we covered Lawn Gnomes. What else could be there? Well, what if there was another story about certain objects coming to life? Well, that one would be one that I see commonly mistaken. And it's actually funny because I just read the book today, so I can tell the differences. And that's Bride of the Living Dummy. Bride of the Living Dummy is oftentimes very confused with the book and episode, and there's a number of differences in it. But for those of you who don't know, Bride of the Living Dummy in the book is basically about the main character, Jillian, and you have these two twins, Amanda and Katie. And basically, it's established that they have this doll named Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen is basically treated as to being this sort of family member by the twins. They're always harassing Jillian, telling them, hey, we need to do this for the doll. They treat her as more important. And you see very early on that Jillian is very fed up and does not like these two twins. And they're very similar to like Lindy and Chris from the first Dummy book. And when they head to a performance by Jimmy O. James, this basically established ventriloquist and kind of performance actor, they basically have this moment where there might be an interaction between Slappy and, let's say, potentially what they think might be Mary Ellen. And to little of their avail, later on in the story, it turns into a big plot point because they actually get Slappy sent to their house. And when Slappy arrives, things start going crazy. And they have to figure out who done it and what's secretly going on behind the scenes. One of the biggest things that you kind of have to acknowledge with the episode that I see confused a lot, especially is Jimmy O. James. A lot of people treat Jimmy O. James as to being this kind of older figure and having a more prominent role within the story. That is not in the book. In the episode, the very opening scene is Jimmy O. James interacting with Slappy in this very stormy night in an alleyway by the dumpster. And you basically get established to their relationship. And when you get to earlier in the story, you have a lot more scenes, behind the stage, on stage, with basically Jimmy O. James and how he kind of ties to kind of like the story and the family. That's not in the book. Let's cover what's in the book. So in the book, Jimmy O. James does not appear in the opening scene. He's only at the talent show. You do get a very brief conversation behind the scenes of the stage, but in the episode, Jillian actually comes back to confront him physically. So you actually get to see more of him and more of the dialogue. In the book, he's out on tour and they actually break into his damn house on 2 occasions. And they're basically having to talk to a neighbor, uncover the mysteries of his house. So when you see people talking about Jimmy O. James' presence in the story of the book, that's not really there. And also, there's a telltale sign. If they say Jimmy O. James is an old man, no, you didn't read the book, because Jimmy O. James in the book is described as being a young guy. He wears a black turtleneck, black jeans, and he doesn't look much older, according to Jillian, than some of their teenage babysitters. So this guy might be in his 20s, early 20s. Jimmy O. James in the episode looks like he's 40, 50. He's an older guy. He's been doing this for a while. And again, he has a bigger presence. Another thing that is, I guess, a difference that people have to acknowledge is that the target of Slappy and his motivations, there's a certain character that Slappy wants as his bride, and in the book, it is significantly, and I mean this, significantly different compared to the episode. So I've heard people say the wrong person's name as to who he's targeting, and it's a very big telltale sign that you might be just coping to kind of defend the book and defend the episode in certain regards, because that's not the case. You know, it was not always in the book. That is an episode exclusive thing. And you also have a different plot line in the episode. In the episode, kind of very similar to Night Living Dummy 3's episode and other Night Living Dummy 2's episode, you have the household being the big focus of this family gathering, them being terrorized by the ventriloquist dolls. In the book, there is a lot of focus on birthday parties. There is an extremely cringy clown performance birthday party that happens. They have this big basement scene in the book involving the birthday party, and that's this grand showdown. And it's much more played up to be much more goofy, much more strange, much more wild, much more chaotic. And the episode is very formulaic to the other Slappy episodes we've seen within the TV show. So those are kind of the telltale signs. And of course, the last one I want to bring up, Mary Ellen's look. Mary Ellen's look is significantly different in the book. She has brown hair, she has violet eyes, she has these red lips, and she's very much played as sort of the cover of the book, this kind of Bride of Frankenstein type of look. And in the episode, she's very different. She has blonde hair. She looks more like this Barbie doll, this more cutesy figure. And that's something that I've also heard people get confused. Well, they say, oh, they love the design of Mary Ellen in the book with her big blue eyes that are very creepy. I've heard this plenty of times. That's not in the book. She doesn't have big, creepy blue eyes that freak out people. No, no, no. She looks very sort of average for a doll. So those are sort of the big things. But if you guys have anything to add, feel free to chime in.
I'll go ahead and add 2 things before I forget them, and then I'll turn it over to Bruce. The 2 big ones for me involve Harrison, I think. If it's not Jimmy O. James, there's also another thing I think we can add about Jimmy O. James, and that is kind of the sequence of events of the story. A lot of people seem to think that the book starts off with Jimmy getting Slappy and it goes into that. Dude, that had like that's like told in of like a flashback in like a diary thing in the book, kind of how he might have like come into contact with Slappy, but the episode is completely new on that. Okay, you confuse that. But the thing about Harrison is one of the telltale signs is if Harrison's a brother or a friend, because in the episode, because they cut out one of the twins, I think the Amanda twin, In the book, they made Harrison the brother. In the book, he's just a friend. So people saying that Harrison's a brother, okay, I can kind of see how you might confuse that one. But the big one to me, and this one, you'd be surprised how much this one gets people tripped up, is the ending. The ending of the episode is so iconic when, spoilers, when Harrison gets possessed by Slappy after he's been, sawed up in the garage, and he's like, Harrison's not here or whatever, and he's just laughing maniacally, and Slappy's eyes are bulging out of his head. That's an episode exclusive thing. You want to know what the ending of the book is? It involves like a whole different character, Jillian. So if you get it that bad, that's how I know you didn't read the book. So yeah, just throwing that out there. Bruce, you have anything you want to add on?
Well, you guys kind of stole my thunder, but I will actually just chime in and say I completely agree with the climax, and the ending is super different. It is. I feel like I feel like some of the writers for the show just didn't like how that went, and I don't blame them, honestly, but not to get into that. And then just kind of went, let's kind of do our own thing with this, because they are so different. It's almost hard to recognize, and could be almost played as its own story. So there's that. Besides that, I will say from personal experience, not to keep bringing stuff like this up, but I feel like the whole Jimmy O. James backstory thing started when the new show came out. Not to get into that either, but I actually have heard people say in the Discord a while back when the show came out. I think they read probably Bride in Preparation because they saw, oh, Slappy has a hat there like he does in the new show. They chose that one for weird reasons and kind of went, the whole backstory of Slappy really reminds me of like Bride. And I'm like, what? Here's the thing. I feel like if they really did choose Bride as their like preparation book, some people do that, some new movie comes out, they want to watch all the ones that came before it. But like, I feel like they're just kind of making stuff up there at that point, like you said, completionist. I don't know. Besides that, basically every point BD made, I have to say for myself as well. I cannot lie. I don't want to repeat what everything you said, but yeah, very valid points.
Yeah, to kind of throw my hat into the ring about the Goosebumps 2023 show lore. There is some lore in Bride. You'd be surprised because when the show came out, I actually went back to those chapters and refreshed. There is some stuff there, but it's not built to any level that show went to with it. It is superficial. It is barely covered. It might as well be an afterthought through the whole story. It's just there to be kind of thrown in there. Um, so yeah, but I think we all made pretty good points. BD, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say so two minor things. So one, yeah, the backstory is only given in the book. When you find the journal, you get this kind of origin story to Slappy. You get sort of what his situation might have been, and that's what the 2023 show kind of built upon. Again, none of that is in the episode. The episode is very much action oriented, kind of more so formulaic towards the climax. You don't get this sort of investigation going on. And another thing, and this is sort of a big thing. This is one thing that me and actually Spongy444 talked about in the Discord. So the book actually has more controversial stuff in the climax that actually got cut out in reprints and very much lessened. So over time, this is not just an episode thing. This is also a reprint thing. So when people bring up the fact about the climax, how much they love sort of the Bride of Living Dummy episode, and you hear the only thing that they leave out some stuff in there. In the book, towards the climax, you get some much more violence with Slappy. He's much more violent in the book than he is in the episode. He is basically beating up Mary Ellen, and it's to the point where it's almost looking like it's as if you're seeing like a domestic abuse scene. She's down on the floor. He's kicking her repeatedly, hurting her. He's hurting the kids. He's burning their eyeballs with the green gunk. He's basically very, very violent in the book. And that may turn off some people. That might have, been too much for the writing at the time. And it very much got cut out. And he also has a very cringy line about love taps. He makes a joke about love taps. All of that is completely cut out of the episode. So when you hear people sometimes bring up the problems about the, whatever, the story of the book, and they don't mention that stuff, or they talk about how Slappy is so good in the book, he has a lot more problematic and cringier scenes in Bride than he does in pretty much a lot of other books. So when you hear it left out, that's sort of a telltale sign to me. Because not just me, but everybody I've talked to that has read Bride of the Living Dummy, I read it recently, all my friends on here and everybody else read it before, the number one thing we talk about is Slappy's problematic stuff in the book that gets censored and cut out from the episode and reprints. So it's a bit fishy that you see some other reviewers not bring that up at all when it comes to the Slappy discussion.
Great thing to add on there. Bruce, did you have something you also wanted to add?
I forgot.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think we covered this one really well. I think we got a lot to say about this one. The next one, I'll take over. This one is an infamous one. This is one of the easily the top two biggest offenders of this topic here. Okay, y'all. And look, I have seen this way too many times to count, but I'm just gonna say what it is: The Haunted Mask 2. Now, The Haunted Mask 2, the book and episode might as well be in name only adaptation status, because the episode, by all means, is nothing what the like the book at all. So how people confuse them is mind-boggling to me, but I can also kind of understand it to a degree, uh, especially if they remember thinking that they loved the episode and didn't like the book as much. It's a common thing about this one. But to run over the book's plot synopsis, just so we can give the stark contrast to its episode, the Haunted Mask 2 book involves one of the bullies from the original Haunted Mask book, Steve Boswell. He is on his last Halloween. He's like 12 years old. It's played up way more in the episode, but it's definitely kind of touched on in the book, where he's like, I'm getting up there in age. Maybe I'm growing out of Halloween, and he's not really feeling what's coming up. He's been kind of, just living his day-to-day life. He's picked up I think he has to forcibly become a soccer coach with a bunch of kindergartners, but these kindergartners pretty much beat him up, and they like break his foot or something to that effect. And he gets a revenge idea that he needs to get back at these kids on Halloween. He's going to get one of these masks that Carly Beth had the previous Halloween, and he's going to scare the crap out of them. So he essentially finds the shop that Carly Beth had gotten her mask after he talked with her, and after she said, kind of advised him to not go anywhere, don't go anywhere near that place. And he breaks and enters, like the episode, which is kind of one of the similarities there to it. He breaks and enters down into the basement and pretty much takes one of these masks. He has a close encounter with the shop owner. The shop owner is not a villain, just running around doing his own thing like the episode. He lives there, and he's kind of closed up shop. So Steve takes the mask. He tries it on one time, takes it off. Then the second time he puts it on, he pretty much has something, in the vein of body horror going on. And he spends a good amount of the second portion of the book being immobilized by what this mask does to him. And that kind of plays into the climax and how his whole plan gets mildly foiled. And now he has to kind of suck up his pride and go to Carly Beth for help. And the ending is essentially something out of left field and involves an ability with these masks and potentially costumes that go along with it. And then you get like a funny ending with Steve's friend Chuck. That's what you're going to expect out of the book. The episode is vastly different. And to not run down the entire plot of the episode, I'm just going to point out the things that I see people praise about the book that actually only happened in the episode. And I can kind of tell if people are misremembering or just didn't read the book. First thing is Chuck Green. Chuck Green is barely in Haunted Mask 2's book. Let's call a spade a spade. Chuck Green was great in the episode. He played the Mafia Don, but I've surprisingly seen a lot of people say they loved Chuck Green's Mafia costume in the book. That was not in the book, bro. That was an episode exclusive thing. The second thing is the shop owner. The shop owner, the plot line with the shop owner, I cannot believe how many people confuse that. The shop owner plotline where he puts on Carly Beth's mask from the first episode / book is only in the episode, okay? He never does any of that in the book, and somehow that gets muffled. There's a couple of scenes that happen in the episode people confuse, like the cemetery scene, only in the episode. The scene where we see him look at his hands and they turn old, that does happen in the book, but not in the context of the episode that I see. They say, oh, he's stumbling around and he falls down and looks at his hands. That's only in the episode. I get it; it's an iconic scene, but it's only there. Now there are some things that people do get right. I think like there is a scene where he's wandering around by Carly Beth's house, but there's a whole other added thing that the episode has. So like the infamous scene where he breaks into Carly Beth's house to steal her head bust, it's only in the episode. And the symbol of love is another thing that I see confused. The symbol of love for Steve in the episode is that he saves Carly Beth, and a lot of people say that happened in the book. Carly Beth actually saved him because in the book he had these black and white cookies that were going to be a symbol of love, but his dog ate them and he had no symbol of love to use. So Carly Beth and him go rummage around the basement, and then they find this costume that magically takes Steve's mask off. That's what happens in the book. And Chuck, to go back to Chuck for a sec, the only thing that we see of him in the book really is the in twist involving a different mask that he might have swiped from the store. So a lot of stark differences. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Bruce and to see if he has anything else he wants to add on to the discussion on this one, because this is like I said, a definitely infamous one. So yeah.
So I'm going to start off by saying that this is a very controversial book. Love it or hate it kind of situation. And I'm kind of the kind that really likes it. This is actually in my top 10 of all time, book-wise, and episode, actually. But the one thing that I must stress that I know the differences for the most part, but I just don't know how people get these things so mixed up, is just how many scenes that were in the book that, and this happens in every episode, of course, but it's very, very prominent here. And that's how many scenes were in the book that are just completely erased in the episode. And not just erased, but they're usually important ones too. Genuine, like really important plot points in this book, not in the episode. And the episode, like you kind of said, is its own entirely different story. I mean, even some effects of like what happens later towards the book, especially with like the symbol of love and everything, is just kind of completely not touched on in the episode. They kind of just ignore it. For better or for worse, a lot of things were just completely kind of cut out. I don't know like what people really prefer, because it's just hard to get a genuine review. And whenever I watch one, especially ones that are spoiler free, it's like, did you read the book, or are you just remembering things that were also in the episode? Because the episode, my friends, although I do love this book, the episode is way more memorable. It just has so many scenes that will stick with you for the rest of your life, really. And I know that shouldn't be touched on here, but I kind of have to, because the book has a lot of scenes, just for one, the soccer thing. That is a massive plot point in the first like 40 pages. And is it memorable? I mean, it builds up what it's trying to get started, but they left it out of the episode for a reason. That's a good way to put it. The episode has so many scenes as well, not in the book. And because it is a two-parter, it has more to work with. That means they can, like I just said, create their own parts that, not to keep saying this over and over again, but people just like, they go, oh, I remember in the book when, Steve was just amazing, and then what's his name? I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Chuck?
I'm tired, but people say that, yeah, the whole mafia thing is so funny, and then I'm like, I know, right? And then they're like, yeah, the book is great, and I'm like, I mean, I can see why things like this can be confused pretty easily, but it's like, unless you haven't read the book in years, I don't see it being something that is just gonna be like immediately striking like, oh yeah, I remember that. But I feel like this is also one of the more popular episodes. You know, it's one that got released on VHS, from what I know. So, especially with some older folks that might not have read the book in a while, they might be confusing things from the episode because the episode's just so infamous. Uh, kind of in respects to the first book and episode, actually. But yeah, it's kind of my thoughts on it. I feel like this actually, maybe out of the entire list here, probably is the most changes in one episode versus book. Though the next one is easily the most controversial by a long shot. And I'll let y'all say the rest of your thoughts, but get ready for that one.
Yeah, BD, you have something you want to add on? I have something, but I'm gonna wait for to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I have a lot to add because this is my number one offender that I have a problem with when people mistake it. Big reason why, and I'm going to say this off the bat. If you think this book was as loved as it is now back in the day, think again, my friend. This book was controversial in the past. When this sequel came out, and we brought this up before, it had a lot more hate. There was a lot more hate and a lot more controversy towards the Haunted Mask 2 book when it came out. People didn't think it was an adequate sequel. People had problems with it. And now I see more as time goes on. This book keeps rising up in the ranks of people loving it. And I don't want to say bandwagon, obviously, because there are a lot of people out there who've read the book and enjoy it for what it is, which I have zero problem with. But when you keep mistaking stuff about the episode with the book, and I'm realizing that's why the score is going up, that I have a problem with. So some of the big things, as my friend Completion has brought up, the whole Halloween atmosphere that takes up the episode, that is significantly reduced in the book. The book is very much Steve Boswell having a revenge story. He's doing this because of the soccer team. That's not that big of a plot point compared to the episode where he wants to live up this Halloween because he's going to be growing up soon. And this is his way of basically getting back and enjoying the atmosphere. Another thing on top of that, again, the shopkeeper. He's only a big villain role, and that's true, the shopkeeper, one of the most iconic and biggest villains out there in the episode. None of that is in the book. Another thing that I want to bring up is the old man mask itself. So in the episode, it is very much emphasized for its effects on Steve. He encounters many different kids. He obviously encountered Carly Beth's mom. He obviously encounters the shopkeeper. And therefore, you see how much more he's suffering inside of this mask. There is a lot of scenes of him losing stamina, losing energy, having the spiders crawling over his face. You see the mask start moving. In the book, it was the mirror scene being a big focus, and then it was sprinkled throughout the book, but the mirror scene is the big focus in the book compared to the episode where you'll notice that it's a lot more emphasis on him meeting other people and him getting worn down by the mask. So when people say they love the mask's effects and how much it had a big struggle on Steve, yeah, that is in the book, but it's significantly increased in the episode. So I feel like that sort of influences people's thought about the old man mask. Because if you watch the episode, you're going to be thinking, wow, this mask is serious. This mask is really torturing this poor kid. In the book, you only get really the mirror scene and then his encounter with Carly Beth when they have to go back to the shopkeeper's place. Aside from that, he doesn't have any encounters really with kids or other people that emphasizes that. And again, the ending. The ending in the book involves obviously the costume, and you have this villain hitting the Dougie and hitting the running man, and it's very goofy and very out of left field. And a lot of people I talked to have been thrown off by that ending compared to the book, or compared to the episode in this case, where it's basically a giant finale. Not just for Haunted Mask 2, but it involves obviously the shopkeeper. Carly Beth has a much more prominent role. In the book, she was just sort of supervising Steve. She was just going there to help him out so he didn't feel so alone and he had that comfort compared to in the episode where she's also a victim. She's also being targeted by the masks. So in the episode, it wraps around Haunted Mask. It's this big finale. All that controversy of Haunted Mask 2's book in the past, for some reason, over time slowly got brought down. And if you love the book for the book's reasons, that's fine. But if you compare it to the episode, you'll see a lot of people's reviews that are spoiler free, like Bruce mentioned, that bring up stuff in the episode. So just make sure you're able to distinguish it and maybe rewatch and reread both because you'll see the differences.
One last thing I need to add is Steve's character himself and his arc. I see a lot of people getting these confused, or maybe conflating things that happen in the book because it happened in the episode. Um, and let's be honest about Steve in the book. He's a jerk. His motives is revenge. He's not a nice person until he's put in a vulnerable state. And Carly Beth saving him kind of gives him a redemption arc. But when people say that Steve had a redemption arc, you need to kind of recognize that that was pretty much played up in the two-parter episode more. You know, Steve, he starts wanting to just be a bully, but as time goes on, he starts to realize as he's suffering way earlier on in the story that maybe him being a jerk has kind of caused this karmic thing in himself. And now he's going through this thing where he realizes that he has an out, right? And a lot of people, I've seen a couple people bring this up, and I want to emphasize this. Yes, Steve could have screwed over Carly Beth in the episode. He could have screwed her over, given her to the mask, but his redemption arc is the fact that he almost just took the fail safe, threw it out the window, and was willing to stay in the mask form he was in forever just to save Carly Beth from being taken. That's his arc. And when people say that Steve had this prominent arc, that's in the episode. You don't really get a prominent arc in the book like you do the episode, at least as noticeable. So there's that, and that's another sign I see. Anybody else have anything to add before we go to number one? Because our number one is really fun, and I'm gonna pass it over to BD for our number one. What's our number one, BD?
Number one is the only contender that can go above Haunted Mask 2 in terms of people mixing up stuff. And this is a very fun discussion because us three, and I know me and Completionists talk about this way too much. It is, my friends, Night of the Living Dummy 3. Right away, people are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't touch my baby. Don't mess with Night of the Living Dummy 3. People, we're just making a distinction between the two. If you want to know a brief plot synopsis, if you're not familiar, many of you probably are, but if you're not, the book is basically about Dan and Trina, right? Their father is a ventriloquist, but he also basically takes broken up dummies and repairs them. He loves finding dummies that are broken. He loves repairing them and then adding them to his collection. And one of his most prominent ones is Rocky. However, he ends up finding a dummy which is called Slappy. And obviously, Slappy carries over from the plot point in Dummy 2, where part of his face was broken and he's repairing them. And this would be normally an exciting find. However, if you're familiar with the dummy stories, you know where it's going to go. And on top of that, there's an added factor, which is a kid by the name of Zane. Zane is obviously a cousin of Dan and Trina, and he's a scaredy cat. He's had problems with them pranking him, harassing him in the past, and he oftentimes has gotten terrified, scared, does not want to spend time with them. So the fact that they're coming together is a problem, especially since Dan and Trina want to go to summer camp. And that's basically on the line, because if they mess up with Zane, they're going to be grounded and not allowed to go, which is something that they're looking forward to. So you get that tension throughout the story. And that's basically the plot synopsis. Now, I've read the book. I'm going to keep my opinion out of it as much as possible. However, there is a lot of problems involving people mixing up these two stories. First of all, multiple dummies. Stop it, people. Stop right now. In the book, multiple dummies appears. If this is a page, treat my hand as a page. Yeah, right down here. This bottom part of my hand, half a page is how much multiple dummies are relevant in the book where they come alive. And I'm not just talking about all dummies. I'm talking about any dummies that are alive. They all come in the final part of the book. It wraps up quickly. There's not a lot of tension. There's not a lot of threat level. In fact, when they do come alive, it's targeting against Slappy in the climax. It's not problems necessarily for them. However, in the episode, you do get a secondary dummy who is very much alive and helping out Slappy, and that is Rocky. Rocky in the episode is alive, is assisting Slappy as his bodyguard, is going around the house, scaring Dan and Trina, working with him. In the book, a lot of the stuff going on that got cleared up in the first part of Dummy 3, which was Zane being the one to pull the pranks, that is basically in 70% of the book. Zane is all the way until the very climax, the one responsible for all these pranks. And Slappy is the only one brought to life in the beginning of the book, and he doesn't do anything in all of the book. He's brought alive early on in the book by reading off the spell, of course. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do any actions that we're aware of. Zane is responsible for all of it up until right before the very climax of the book up in the attic. In the episode, Slappy's moving around, causing trouble, bringing a lot of pain and suffering to the kids. He's an actual threat level. He has Rocky assisting him right there with it. He has a lot of cool scenes in the episode. So when you hear people saying that they love Rocky in the book, red flag number one. That they love all the stuff Slappy does in the book, red flag number two. That they love the multiple dummies in the plot, red flag number three, strike, you're out. That's how I know you didn't read the book, because that stuff is not prevalent. And also, another thing, there is a certain power that Slappy has that may or may not have to do with turning people into dummies. And this power was so prominent that the 2023 show copied it for how iconic and dope it was. Yeah, that's not in the book, people. Again, if Slappy's not doing anything in the book, that is not even in the question. Him turning people into dummies in the book is not even existent. So when I hear people say that they love the scene where a certain character gets turned into a dummy in the book, that's not in the book. That's only in the episode. And also, another big thing people get confused about, accordingly, would be the climax and the ending. The climax in the episode involves this awesome kind of showdown and finale, and let's say something to do with a lightning bolt. Very, very explosive, very, very dope. A good finale to Slappy if that's where they wanted to end it off. In the book, you have a lot of dummies just tugging on Slappy's arms, and then he collapses to the ground, and that's it. That's it, people. They just tug on his arms, his legs, and then he just collapses. And then that's the end. That's the whole climax. There's no fight scene. There's no family relationship between Rocky and Trina and them kind of negotiating with each other. There's no redemption arc for Rocky. There's no big, big climax scene ending off Slappy. And then the ending to the episode may or may not involve a certain character doing something very freaky. It's very iconic for being weird, very memorable to a lot of Goosebumps fans. Yeah, again, that's not in the book. In the book, it's more so a passing of the torch moment, if you know what I mean, involving a certain dummy. And that's sort of the big twist. The fact that they were able to pull off this very kind of mean act at the end of the book. And the episode is very much a family bonding moment. They come together, and then not everything is all as it seems involving one of the family members. So when you hear people commenting on Zane, commenting on stuff, and like all the stuff that I just mentioned, none of it is in the book. And again, this is a big problem because across the years, I have seen so much love for Night of the Living Dummy 3. And it's always plagued my mind because I read the book and I'm like, why do people enjoy this? To me, it was lacking a lot of stuff. And then I see reviews, and I keep seeing people bring up stuff that's in the episode. And I'm like, guys, I think you need to rewatch Night of the Living Dummy 3, and you'll realize how much better that the show made it. And in a way, this to me is a little bit of an insult sometimes to the directors and producers, Dan Angel, Billy, and all of them, because they put forth that effort and time to improve the script, to add all this different material in the episode, to make so many iconic moments for us. And then that gets attributed to the book. And no offense to Stein, but you excluded all of that stuff from the story. So you have to give credit where credit is due. We have to give our roses to the producers and directors of the show. They improved it by a lot. They made it memorable to all the fans. And you have to show respect by knowing the differences between the two. And we'll pass it off to Completionist first, and then obviously to my boy Holden, my boy Slappy, because I know Completionist has his own thoughts. So let me know what you think, my brother.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head on a lot of those things. For me, when we're talking like Dummy 3 is probably one of the more talked about books in our Discord server. Annoyingly put, but so many takes I've seen on Dummy 3, the big three I see is Slappy's powers being the first one. Look, I get it. You're infatuated by Slappy's abilities and all that. Maybe you're more a newer gen fan and you grew up on the 2015 movie where he's like psychic and can have psychic abilities, and like same thing in Haunted Halloween and in the Slappy World books. But that's not in the book. None of those powers, him turning people into dummies, that's not there. The second thing is Rocky. And look, I know I can understand if you love Rocky, okay? But Rocky is in a collective less than, I think, 2 whole paragraphs in the entire book. I think he's brought up early on as one of the father's puppets, and then later on in the book, he's just one of many that get resurrected to come after Slappy. That's it. That's it. He might be in like a kitchen table scene as well, but that's it. He has an actual role, an actual character in the episode. And I think that's where people are coming from. They love Rocky in the episode, but they're misattributing or maybe coping the fact that he's just not in the book. Okay? That's just coping to me, and one of the classic examples of it. And the third thing is the dummy action. Okay, you can't tell me that Dummy 3 has any dummy action. Okay, as you brought up, over 70% of this book, okay, is just recontextualizations and fake outs involving Zane pulling pranks, framing Trina and Dan. And when people say, oh, Trina and Dan have a great story arc, they have this, they go through this whole touching thing with Zane. They don't have anything touching with Zane in the book. All of that stuff in the middle portion might be sweet, and I can kind of see it, but it gets thrown at the door when Zane pretty much drops the bombshell on him that he's not going to play nice anymore after the climax. And the mean spirited ending is kind of like, revenge is a dish best served cold. In the episode, the whole stakes about them wanting to go to summer camp but can't if they get in trouble is still there. But that whole emotions and them going through that story with Zane, it's almost like you get 2 totally different characters out of Trina and Dan in the episode because of their story arc and their experience with their cousin. I'm flabbergasted that people can confuse things like this noticeably different from the book, in my opinion. But Bruce, since you got the man Slappy in your lap, why don't we ask Slappy and Bruce their thoughts on the Dummy 3 debacle here?
Now, this is the one exclusive case where I don't like to bring opinions in, but I kind of have to at this point because, you see, in my opinion, this is one of the most average Goosebumps books known to man. It's just really the case in my opinion. Now, the reason I say this is because of something y'all actually both brought up, and that is that the entire first 80 pages or so of this 120 something page book is just 100% fake outs. None of it happened. It's really stupid. I'm sorry if you like the book. I think you're kind of bluffing there. As far as the episode goes, it rolls straight into dummy action, so I can see why people really like the episode, including me. Book, none of that happens until so far in that you're almost like, well, what's actually going to happen now? And another thing, like you guys said in the book, in the episode, that's very different from the book, is that multiple dummies are alive. In the book, they are not until, like you said, very end. And at that point, doesn't need to be like argued with so much. I hear so many arguments where people say, I love Dummy 3, and one of their biggest reasons for it is having multiple dummies, and it's so corny because I'm like, there's not multiple dummies until one damn page. All right, one page, and that is just so ridiculous. And I'm sorry, if are you saying Rocky being moved by Zane? Because if that's the case, I guess, but why would you like that? It's a fake out. Anyways, the opinions on this book in the episode are extremely wild. They are night and day, and honestly, there's barely any similarities I can see throughout both of them. So the fact that it's not even the episode, but more so the book, where people just get so mixed up with both of them. People will just start making stuff up in their heads. People will start, I don't want to be mean here, but I'm just saying people will actually read this book, and it's pretty easy to see that they have read it, and they will still just get extremely easy things to differentiate each other with, confused, and it's just it actually kind of gets old after a while because I've seen it so many times. Comments, man. Have y'all heard of a comment section on YouTube? Because it's a beautiful thing, right, Slappy? Yeah. If I told you how many times I have seen people say, I love Dummy 3 because of the dummies. Y'all, first of all, I want to just say it right here, and this is just an opinion, but Slappy's kind of mid in this book. I don't think he's that fully utilized for how much of it is just a fake out. Plus, on top of that, if you're saying dummies plural, where? There's none. I'm like, were you like skimming the book? Did you miss the part where they find out Zane was doing this? That's kind of how I feel. I feel like the book, although average, I don't think it deserves the hate sometimes people give it. I also feel like I can understand why people have so many frustrations with it, because people just keep uh I guess making stuff up in their heads. I feel like that's the only way to put it with this one, where they just kind of go, "Oh yeah, remember this in the book?" and it never happened. That's the thing. And with some of these, they are generally the same story. With this one, it's not. I mean, you got the characters, those are the same. Besides that, you could go all over the place. That's my final thoughts.
Just as a shameless self plug, I did make a video called "This Goosebumps book is the most overrated," and based off of that, just wanted to highlight that in my comment section, nobody told me reasons as to why they love the Night Living Dummy book so much. They didn't bring up any plot points. They just told me that it was their favorite and they love Dan and Trina and they love this. However, every time I see a review, sometimes by some of those same people, we're not going to drop any names, but it's always talking about characteristics that's not in the book, and that's always going to be a problem. I don't think that necessarily that will change until people start rereading it. But again, like Bruce brought up, and this is a great point by Bruce that I wanted to emphasize on. Zane moving dummies is not dummy action. That does not count. And if you want to add some cherry on this doo-doo Sunday, all right, here's the thing, man. If Slappy was, let's say Slappy, right? He's awakened early on in the book. If he's not doing anything until 70, 80 pages in by Zane, how does that help Slappy's character in terms of defending the book? Because that means he was sitting by idly, letting this kid pull pranks without interrupting, without doing any mischief of his own, compared to every other dummy book where he's automatically taking an effect. If you read Night Living Dummy 2, he's active. If you read Bride, he's active. If you read the books after, he's active. How come this one, for some unknown reason, he's on standby the whole time with no explanation and no plot? So that actually adds to the problem in the book compared to the episode where he's the main focus, the main, star of the show from the beginning. So when people say, oh, we love Slappy in Night Living Dummy 3 the most, he's not even barely a character. He only appears at the very end as a cameo at most. And his character is actually kind of not ruined, but lessened in the book because for some reason, this iconic villain is just sitting there. Imagine if you were, imagine there was a Haunted Mask book. We know the Haunted Mask is active. We know it's ready to go. And it takes till page 80 for it to start affecting Carly, Beth, Steve, or any character in the book. All the fans would immediately be going, what's wrong with this book, man? We're not getting any action with Haunted Man. What's wrong with this book? But now Let Me Dummy gets a pass. We got to raise some eyebrows there. But that's where I'm going to leave it.
And this is kind of like, we're getting into like the closing thoughts on the phenomenon itself about people misattributing events in the book that didn't happen and only happened in the episode kind of thing. What do you think it is? Do you think it's people that maybe have experienced both and they're just mixing things up? Do you think it's people coping that, since they love the book or maybe they like the book and they like aspects of the episode, but maybe they wish certain aspects of the episode were in the book and they kind of just convinced themselves that it actually happened? Or do you think people are just not reading the book and just watching the episode instead? Out of those three options, what do you think is the most likely from your experience through conversations and seeing people's reviews?
What I actually think is mostly happening, and it's hard to say because I feel like there's a mixture between those three for sure. Actually, kind of equally. I feel like all three of those happen from time to time, but one that I see that I think happens a lot is just people will make bold claims against people, saying, not necessarily gaslighting by any means, but they will say and defend this, especially Dummy 3 of all books. I'm just going to use this as an example. They will defend it in a very bold way. And most of the time, they don't remember much from the book. They may have read the book, but they remember more from the episode because, let's face it, it's more effective. I think we can all agree on that. Even Dummy 3 fans. And I feel like that is just the main issue here, especially with a book like that, is they probably read the book at one point, can't remember jack squat about it, and now kind of use the episode as their way of getting by with making points about the story, and what they like about it, but don't actually remember much of what happens in the book because not much does happen. It's kind of what I feel like.
I can see that. BD, what do you think the phenomenon is in your opinion?
So this is my answer, and I mostly just came to this over. I've been in the Goosebumps community since I was a kid. I watched Goosebumps videos since I was young, kept up with the TV show, and now, I'm an active part of the community. I think the community is divided into two, and the two reasons for why this phenomenon happens is actually different depending on the age range. So I think that the first option, people get mixed up, we can X that one out. The reason being because a lot of people have the resources available there for cheap. There's a lot of Goosebumps books that are cheap you can get. You can find them. There's books online. There's books you can find in different places. And there's even a wiki. There's a wiki with the whole plot on there. You can read it quick, find out even the differences, even in the trivia section. We can exclude that out. I think the older fans, and this is my opinion, I think the older fans out there, maybe some of the ones that were around when these books were out, I think fall into that second option. You are coping, so you want to bring the book to a certain level, maybe for nostalgia, maybe because it's one of your childhood favorites, and maybe there's some people out there that they like talking about red herring books that are not as, I guess, praised, the more controversial ones. They want to praise those books. They want to make them seem at a certain level. So what they'll do is that in these cases, Haunted Mask 2 has a fantastic episode that's iconic. They would have been around for it. Night 11 3, fantastic episode. They were around for it. So they're going to try to bring up that book as much as they can to make sure that, hey guys, this was very nostalgic for me. I loved it. And they're probably going to think that people won't fact check it and people won't go back and read or just take their word for it, especially if they have a cult following, especially if they're a respected reviewer, especially if they, have read a bunch of Goosebumps books. So they're going to find a way to cope and bring it to a certain level. That will not work when people reread these books, because that's a big fault that, like all of us, we've read the books and watched the episodes. So as soon as that happens, we start looking at a lot of people who talk a certain way kind of fishy. And we're wondering, why are they, making these bold claims? And then you find out that they might have loved this book when they were younger. They might have had an affliction for it, or maybe they just like talking about it because it doesn't get enough attention as a book. So that's my reason for the older community. For the younger community, I think it's the third reason. I think people are just not reading it. To be fair, accessibility for younger kids is harder. Reading is not as popular as it used to be back in the day. I think people love watching the episodes. It's very easily available. Just as an example, we have a podcast, and just to give you guys a little bit of behind the scenes, reading books is a lot more time consuming than the episodes. When we're doing episode versions of our podcast episodes, it's actually quite easy for us to do them compared to the books, which accessibility is a problem. We have to factor in the length of the book, we have to factor in the fact that we're all busy. Younger kids may not be having the time or focus to reread these books, so they just want to take the shortcut and watch the episode. And then what ends up happening is they think, okay, the TV show was probably going to be faithful, right? They would have been faithful because they had to be faithful. No, my friend, that's not the case. And they probably listen to the reviewers who are coping and trying to bring it up to a certain level, and then they'll just trust word of mouth. Word of mouth is a powerful form of marketing. Whatever word of mouth comes around to people that you're friends with or you're familiar with, you're just going to trust what they say. But you actually need to dive into the material to fact check, to come up with an opinion for yourself. Because if you follow other people's opinions strictly, you might be misinformed, not because of any inherent reason, but maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you see things differently. You should find your own voice and your own thoughts before you just trust word of mouth, because stuff can get misspread. Information can be misspread. And I think that's a problem with the younger community. And for the older community, guys, let me just say this because I've been wanting to say this for a long time. We can give roses to the producers and directors of the show. Stein does not need praise 24/7. I don't need any verification that I love Stein. I collect all of his books. I talk about all of his stuff. I praise his good work. Stein can be wrong. There's times that Stein can fumble, that he can fail, and the producers and directors can pick up on that fumble and then just nail it, three-pointer right to the bucket buzzer beater and hit us with a banger. All right. And we can give them their roses for that. We don't need to be anti TV show. We don't need to think that Stein didn't have ghostwriters, that didn't have fumbles, that didn't have misses. Every author, every person has that. And as soon as you own up to that, you're going to appreciate his books a lot more. But if you keep coping that every book of his has to be to a certain level and you have to pick something like, oh, Chicken, or Why I'm Not Afraid of Bees to be the only books you make fun of because they have goofy covers, and that's not really proving any credibility. And again, that applies to everybody. That's just a little PSA, and those are my thoughts. I could be wrong, but this is what I observe.
And I think we kind of touched base. I think Bruce did a good job. I think you did a good job. Um, for me, in the conversations I've had, some of these go the whole blatant route. Like I could throw up Fever Swamp for an example, with like the Swamp Hermit's death. That never happened. And it's when so many people say that, I'm just like, did you read the book? Because in the book he saves Grady. Like, how do you fumble that? Like, and it just comes, in my opinion, I think it's actually the third option majority of the time. People love the IP. They probably grew up in the TV show generation. And I've seen a lot of people my age get this stuff wrong too. It's not just younger kids, and I'm almost confident you're on the money there. With a lot of these younger kids, they will collect the books. They're a fan of the show. They watch the episodes before they ever touch the books. And when they're talking with their friends and their passions about Goosebumps, they pretend that they might have read it so they don't look like a poser. And you can clearly tell those type of kids if they actually read or not, the younger demographic. But the older demographic gets it wrong too. So I think a lot of the time it's from people just either they haven't read the book in a very long time, like Bruce said, and they just remember nothing about it. So they're basing all of their arguments on the episode, which is almost the same as not reading the book. So I think it's most of the time the third option. Either they haven't refreshed themselves in many years on the topic, or they just watch the episode and assume that it's the book. And a lot of the time, it's these episodes that they confuse the most. It's the ones that are ironically majority of them, like we already talked about Shrunken Head, where I think majority of fans like the book more than the episode, but the rest of them, the fans say the episodes are better than the book. So there might also be mild coping there because maybe they did read these books as a kid, maybe they did, read this book once upon a time, or maybe, they just have a lot of nostalgia with the covers and whatnot. Some people literally just collected them for the covers, surprisingly. But even despite that, there is a lot of, it seems like it's like kind of like a mixture of that coping. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like a mixture of that coping into not actually reading the book, you just watch the episode kind of situation. So that's my thoughts. I think the first option of them, maybe just, well, I forget what it exactly was I mentioned, where maybe they get the two confused. That you brought up the wiki, that is a good fail-safe argument, because if you can't bother to Google search the wiki just to refresh your memory, even though if you read the book recently, and you start pulling stuff out of your butt, that's egregious. Especially when you have resources like that available. We didn't have that when we were younger, but you don't have that excuse anymore. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Anybody else have anything you want to add before we close out? All right, so that was our collaboration video on our top 5/top 6 Goosebumps books that get conflated with their episode counterparts. Let us know down in the comment section what your thoughts were on our picks. Do you think we were on the money with some things? Have you experienced similar conversations? I mean, what books out there that you think that we should have mentioned? We're all dying to know this. And like we said in the beginning of the video, please go sub up BD Horror and go sub up Goosebumps Enthusiasts. And if you're not subbed to me, I wouldn't mind you subbing up to me too. We appreciate it. We appreciate the love and the feedback and the support as always. And we'll hope to see you next time. Take care, everyone.